Welcome back to the show, everyone. On today's episode, I'm excited to have Dr. Victor Manzono join us. He is a business mindset coach at Empower Your Reality. Victor, welcome to the show.
Brother, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, it's really exciting to have you. Just for the audience, can you walk us through your background? Tell us what you do.
Yeah, so I was practicing chiropractor for 12 years, certified pediatric the last couple, and did that for a while, loved it, and about 3 years ago, I started getting into coaching entrepreneurs. I got to a point where I was tired of hearing the advice that entrepreneurs get, the grind, the hustle, and all these other things that you hear nowadays still being told. And I was like, this goes against universal laws. This goes against nature, the laws of biology, how things work. And I just was like, you know what? I've tested these things and I've seen this great result where I'm working less, making more, leading a more fulfilled life. And I was like, well, I need to teach entrepreneurs this. So I started doing some coaching 3 years ago, and I went full time this year in January to where I help entrepreneurs really achieve their dream life, understand how to play in this dance called life, not to be so stressed out and deal with the struggles or the how much extra. Don't get me wrong. There's work. Everyone, when I share my message, everyone's always like, it's too good to be true. You have to work. And I'm like, I never say you don't have to work, but there's a difference between, like, I use the story like David and Goliath. The way we're taught in business now, the advice we're given and the advice of how to become successful is take 10,000, 100,000, a million rocks and keep throwing it until you finally hit that target, right? The work I teach is like what David did, take one rock and you throw it and you hit it, and that's success. That's what I do to help entrepreneurs achieve more success with less work and less stress.
Wow, okay. Thank you so much for that intro. There are a million different ways I want to go with this. So let's start with the top of my list. You were in the medical field, and how did you convert or switch to entrepreneurship? Usually it doesn't go hand to hand. I mean, I know a few doctors that are also entrepreneurs, but what was that light bulb switch moment where you became an entrepreneur?
I think I've always had entrepreneurship in my mind. Chiropractors are more entrepreneurs compared to like medical doctors. Standard medical doctors, for the more or common medical doctors, are in hospitals, so they're in a group setting, those kind of things. Chiropractors, for the most part, we run our own businesses, so we are entrepreneurs in our own realm. I will say, from a coaching perspective and being a chiropractor myself, there are some who are chiropractors, which is more like, this is just what I do. And then there's entrepreneurs who know how to run their business and operate that. But for me, it was one of those things where, I remember when I was making the change, I was going into computers in undergrad, and I had this health issue show up where it just wasn't going away. And I was into nutrition and working out and all these things. And the more I did that, it just wasn't helping. And so, in long story short, I ended up going back to a chiropractor I went to when I was a kid, and changed my life, totally transformed everything. And that inspired me to go into becoming a chiropractor. But I was going into computers originally. So I decided to go, you know what? I'm going to forget going this computer route. I'm going to go into business then, because I do want to run my own business. I want to have my own business. And I had a lot of motivation to want to be successful financially, because I came from a family that didn't have abundance of wealth. They're blue collar family, paycheck to paycheck most of the time. And I didn't want to grow up like that. So that's kind of what, had me looking that route all the time, of being entrepreneurial and whenever I could. And when I was in chiropractic school, I was, studying and trying to learn from the best docs that were in the profession. I mean, I think I shadowed over 40, 50 chiropractors in my time at school, just so I can learn what it was to be a successful chiropractor in the conditioning of what I was being told. And that was kind of my drive to be like, okay, this is how I want to run my office. This is what I'm going to do here. This is how I want to do that, and so forth.
So becoming chiropractor was kind of your transition into entrepreneurship. And when you were back doing computer stuff, did you want to explore entrepreneurship, or was that brand new after chiropractor?
It started after, like, the whole world opened up, because I got, like, it was interesting too, because I went to business school, and it was like, I tell people all the time, like, undergrad business, you're not going to, it's not like an MBA or anything, but I had some amazing teachers that, like, were just, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, I look back at my life and I'm like, wow, they really were planting some really good seeds. And they kind of got me to look at business, because I never was taught business. I didn't, I seen businesses. I know people who had them, but to me, I just thought, if you have a business, you're successful. You make a lot of money. And it was one of those things where I had to, learn when I was learning this process and learning how to run it. Like I was learning stuff that I was just blown away by because these guys were talking about like, just investing and learn how to evaluate a company and this and that. And this was on top of what we had to learn in the class. So that's kind of what instilled it in me. And then all of a sudden it was just like, well, I'm going the chiropractic route. So this is what I'm going to be doing and what I want to do and how to expand and so much more.
I think that's really funny that you mentioned having a business means you're going to make a lot of money because you and I both know that's not usually the case. In fact, most of the people who have businesses fail and lose money. So, talk us about that. How did you, at that early stage, equate having business equals a lot of money?
I guess for me, seeing people, it was more of the energy production that I saw from family and friends that somebody who had a business. They're like, oh, they have a business, they do this, look at you. And sometimes they may have had a nice car or something. I'm not saying they weren't successful or they were. I had no idea. I couldn't evaluate that. But I just go by looks and I was paying attention to the energy of what like how it's like someone sees someone who like has someone who maybe like oh they have a couple businesses and this and that, you look and they're like oh wow, hey, how are you, oh my goodness, how you doing, and I'm just be like wow, you're putting a lot of energy to that person. And so that was just my thought process because some people did that I knew who had businesses, man, they were very well to do. And so I was like wow, okay, so I guess when you have a business that's kind of how that goes. And that was just again old just programming and conditioning of what I was seeing in my growing up. um, but then you have your own business and then you're like, okay, because I was very ambitious. I was studying, I knew universal laws already when I was coming out of school. I understood spirituality and spiritual truths, everything that I share now. I already had understanding back then. And then I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. So I remember I had a patient who was like, he loved what I did. He loved my passion. He loved everything. And he's like, I want to invest in you. And he's like, I want to this can work for me. I have a business that can, and this and that. We were talking about some things. And so he's like, you have like a business plan? I'm like, oh, absolutely. I got a 28-page business plan. He's like, okay, that's ambitious. I'm like, well, again, business school, right? You have to have a business plan. And so I was like, yeah, I can share it with you. And he was looking at my projections and he's like, I was like, I'm going to make $1 million in 3 years. And he was just like, that doesn't that I can't see that happening for you. And I was like, what do you mean? I go, I compound. Chiropractic's not a standard business where, it's like whatever I had the first year, that already adds on to the second year. And then whatever I'm adding to the second year adds from my first. So it's like it compounds. I'll make it happen quicker. And he's like, he goes, I've been in business for 30 some years. I've owned, 10 different businesses. I've been in, all this stuff. He's like, I can't see this working out, but if we can maybe modify this a little bit. And I was like, what do you mean? I was, again, very passionate coming out, not knowing all that I know. And, but it was funny because then, you hit those strides in business where it didn't even get close to that in the first year or two. And I was, struggling. And it's just like, oh my God, what's happening here? And that kind of was like, I had to look elsewhere and look at different aspects to redirect or change how my thinking or whatever it may be to change the course on where I was going.
That's really interesting because I think everyone listening to this who has started a business, that naive state, right? I've been through it multiple times with all my businesses. I'm like, oh, this could be it. And then you realize only a month in or 2 months in or 3 months in, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much more difficult than I initially thought. And it reality just slaps you, right? So I am curious about this because it seems like what you're describing is survivorship bias, right? You only see the successful businesses because all the other businesses failed, and that's why you're not seeing them as successful because they're no longer here. And so when you're interacting with these successful business owners, what are some traits you find that you think contributed to their success?
A lot of it was, getting to know a couple of them. I mean, it was always like, it always came off like they were just smart, right? And it was just like one of those things. Like when I saw my chiropractor, he was very successful, and when I was 19, and he just knew everything. Like it was amazing. I can ask him anything on health, and he just knew the answer right off the top of his head. And I was always like, how the heck does he know all this? My mom would be like, well, he's been doing this for a long time. This is what he does. This is what he loves. So he has the answers. But then I got to know some of my dad's friends who were very successful, and they had businesses. And one of the things I saw is that they were disciplined in what they did every single day. Like it didn't matter what showed up in their life. This is what they had to do to get things done. Like one guy owned apartments and a tenant comes out. He's like, okay, I got to go in. I got to get things cleaned up. I got to do it. He could have hired people, but he was like, this is what I do. This is what I make sure this thing, I want it done a certain way. And he was just very adamant about how he did things. and that's something I saw, seeing consistency showing up in these individuals, and who they surround themselves with was another thing I saw. Kind of the standard advice of what you see, that most people say, don't, make sure watch to see who you're surrounding yourself with and stuff. But the biggest thing for me was just being disciplined and and appreciating delayed gratification. And I think those were the two big ones, because a lot of them they'll be doing something and they're like, yeah, I'm not making, I didn't make money here at this point, but I knew it was going to work out eventually. I just had to get through these things. And it was always fascinating because I'm like, man, don't you worry about this, don't you worry about that, oh my god, because again, I had a lot of limiting beliefs about money and scarcity mindset. So, and he's like, no, it all turns around, you just constantly do this. Or like, I was like, what stocks are you interested in that you invest in? And he was just there, some would share. And it was interesting because it's like they're getting into a company that tanks, like they're, it's going down, and all of a sudden I'm like, aren't you worried? No, so it's over. You got to remember, I'm looking at this in the long term. I don't care what it does in the short term. I know where this company is going to go. It's just got to go through its period of time, which it's going to go through. And I'll just be like, wow. But I didn't hone that in, even though it was great advice. That's the sad thing. The only thing I did hone in, I've always been very disciplined in everything I do. So the discipline was always there. That was easy for me to adapt to. It's like, what do I got to do? Wake up, uh, I've gotten later business advice, but I'm just sharing the business advice I got before going into chiropractic school and so forth. And those are kind of a couple of the things that I saw.
Got it. So, coming from a financial services background myself, delayed gratification is a very important concept when it comes to investing, exactly like your mentor or the person in your story was talking about, where you have to go through the short term volatility to get that long term result. How does delayed gratification play into the role of starting up a business?
Yeah, it is critically important. Even a lot of stuff I work with the clients in coaching, I work on vision and vision work, and really that's that's like the first big thing that we work on. And the whole purpose of that is to get your mindset stuck into the long term factor, right? Because when we can have a vision and we know where we're going, you don't really, the short term may, depending on where your mindset is, it may affect you a little bit, but it really shouldn't, because you're going to be like, this is fine. This is where we're going. I know this is happening. And I try to get my clients in that state where they have a faith within themselves. And I don't mean faith by religious term. I mean faith that it's inner knowing that this is going to happen. And then it's just you working on that. So if you're starting a business, it's one of those things like expect ups and downs. I mean, I don't want to say expect the worst, because I always say you can expect the best. That's fine. That can happen too. But there's principles that you want to make sure you follow up on, and just know that keep your mind focused on long term. And just know that, because if you look at the most successful people in the world, they all focus long term. You look at Jeff Bezos, right? When he has a quarterly meeting, his quarterly meeting with his team, whoever that is, they're not talking about the next quarter. They're talking about the next quarter in 2 to 3 years. And that's what they're doing all the time. Or like Elon Musk a few years ago before COVID, I remember when the Model 3 wasn't getting out. He was having issues getting the production up as fast as he could. And the business world was hammering him over the summer. And, he just had negative returns coming up. And they're like, how are you going to do it? You're going to have to, this and that. And he's like, you guys are looking at this from a short term. He goes, that's not, I'm paraphrasing everything he said, but he's like, at the end of the day, he's like, we're going to get there. We're just trying to figure these things out. And then next year, look what happened to his stock, and look what happened the year after that. And now look at where he is, so it's one of those things where this is why I always talk about vision being so critical, because you get stuck, you focus on that long term, and just know that the other thing is you want to make sure everything, this is why I work on vision, because you have a vision, then your actions have to align to the long-term vision, not the short term. Right? Because you think about it like your financials, right? So when the stock goes down, or we're in a recession, or whatever may happen, panic happens, people want to sell, get out, oh my God. And it's like, if you just calm down, it's going to continue to grow over time. Just keep reinvesting, do talk, whatever. I'm not going to give advice because you know this better than I do. But it's one of those things where you keep doing that. And if you look in the long term, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm freaking killing it in a year or two. And it's just like, yep, that's how that works, And so it's one of those things, and that's how it is in business. If you don't get caught up in the short term, like COVID hit. I remember, even in the chiropractic world, there was a lot of, I took a 40% hit my first month when COVID went in lockdown when I practiced in Chicago. That wasn't bad. That was about the average, actually. There was some offices that closed for good. Some went 80, 90%, and so forth. I had coaching clients at the time that could not practice. I mean, they could not practice. They weren't chiropractors. They couldn't run their business anymore because due to the lockdowns, they couldn't go. One was in salon industry and stuff like that. And now you have two choices, right? You can get stuck into the short-term fear, or you can focus on the long term. And so with myself, I focused long term. In 2 months, we were breaking records in my office again. 2 months, right? Not bad. I had 3 clients that had their businesses shut down. A year later, they can go anywhere in the world now. They can travel anywhere in the world, right? And it was long term vision. And we just, some of them we had to re-strategize, but it was the same vision of what they had. It was just we had to modify it a little bit with what they did. And then all of a sudden, focus on the limiting beliefs, focus on those kind of things, because that's what matters most. And then from there, all of a sudden, now they're flourishing. 2-3 years, one's a couple wrote a couple books, and all these other things. And it's fascinating, and I just love seeing that, because again, it's keeping your mind on the long term, keeping your focus on the long term, rather than getting so caught up. And I'm not saying the short term isn't important. It is to certain degrees, but you really want it. The long term is what's going to give you that longevity.
I think that's a very, very valuable insight. I remember, while you were mentioning Bezos and Elon Musk, it reminded me of Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, where he talks about don't worry about short term, worry about the long term, right? A lot of these companies are worried about their next quarterly report or what's happening, and they're thinking so short term, but that's not the game they're playing. Successful companies like Amazon and Tesla, they're focusing on the infinite game, which they don't care about the next 3 months. They care about what's happening the next 5 years, like you said. So very, very important point. So great. I really do appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned COVID and how your business dropped 40%, and then a little bit later you started hitting records again. So tell us about that journey. That is incredible. Congratulations.
Oh no, thank you. It was one of those things where, when we knew COVID, I knew COVID was going to be, I knew lockdowns were coming in end of February, because I started educating my patients on, like, hey, just get a heads up, don't get into the fear, and so forth. Now, sharing as much as I could with them. And it was one of those things where, people just freaked out. Lockdowns came, they didn't know this virus. So people were just all, and I remember when I was looking at the numbers at 1 week, the lowest point we hit was 40%. And my wife's like, because first my wife's like, are you worried we're gonna have to shut down? I'm like, no, if we have to shut down, we figure something out. I'm like, but I go, we're not going to shut down. We're primary care physicians in the state of Illinois. I'm like, that's going to be essential. Like, we'll figure out what we have to do and what game we have to play to be able to serve our patient base. And then there we had to do certain things, and I was like, that's fine. Here's the team. We'll structure it. But what I ended up doing, and I've never done this before in my career, is I knew at that point I had to do something different. Now, what I mean by different is I never marketed my business. Yes, I have a Facebook page. Yes, I have a website. Some people say that's marketing. What I mean by marketing is paid marketing or anything like that to get out to expose. So, and I never give a discounts on coming into my office. And so at that time, I was like, people are stressed, people are worried. I worked with a lot of kids. I'm a certified pediatric chiro, so I'm looking at things going, moms are now going to have to become not only, and I say moms because 99% of the time it was moms, is that they're going to have to not only be moms, not only they have to work, but they're going to have to also be teachers, psychologists, and all these other things. And so from there, we started to look, and we're like, let's do Facebook ads. We've never done them before, but we're going to do them. We're going to offer a discount. I want to do it just for the short term to help out, to let people know that there is a solution to this. So we saw the problem. We knew what it was going to lead to. So we started to say we can intervene with that and help and divert that problem and help your child out and also help there. My big concern was sensory processing kids who have sensitive issues like ADHD or autistic. I was highly, highly concerned about them because they need to do things, get out, so their whole world's going to change. And we just started educating our community on that. And, then all of a sudden the next month we start, that month and next month we started getting some patients to flow from that. And then what happened, the reason why we broke records was because we got back to our normal numbers of what we were seeing that next month. And then all of a sudden people who left the office were coming back in June. And then I was hoping we had momentum from getting new clients from the Facebook ads. And then after that, we stopped doing the Facebook ads and we just kept the special going just because of COVID. Because we really wanted to help our community out. And again, you had to do something different, and we did. But the mindset wasn't, some people look and go, well, Facebook ads work for you and you did that discount. And that's why it worked. No, it didn't. from our meetings, my wife and I, we would sit and say, well, why did we do what we did? It was because we knew the stress levels of what families were going to be going through. I mean, I can't even, I can't even imagine having a couple of kids. You have to work full time. This husband has to work full time, and yet you have to have them go through, homework and all this other stuff, online learning and all. It's just, I knew, because I was educating my patients too, like if this lockdown happens, here are the things you need to do so that you don't have mental health issues, because you're going to have if you do not do this, there's going to be massive health issues. Look what happened in health issues. I mean, alcohol went up. I can't remember how high the percentage went for consumption. There was a domestic abuse went up like crazy. I think 50-60% during that time. These are things that, it's like you got to think of people. I think we forget sometimes, and I don't want to get too on the health side here, but I think we forget that we are also animals. And animals, put animals in a cage and see what happens, right? You're going to see what happens to their well-being, their mental state. Just look at it. And we forget that we're like that also. We have these nice cages now called these homes that we live in, but which gives us a little freedom. But long story short, this is the kind of mindset we had. We had to look at it from some different way. And then we took action steps to do that. And that's kind of how we turned the corner pretty quick.
Wow. Well, congratulations. One phrase I picked up on while you're talking is, it seems like you came from a place of service. You're talking about how you can help your clients rather than, oh crap, we're going under. How do we support ourselves? That you didn't mention that whatsoever. You talked about how can I serve my clients better. And I think that's a huge takeaway, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners, at least when they're starting out, completely miss that point on how can you serve others throughout whatever's happening in the world.
It is, and this is what I try to teach entrepreneurs. This is what I do in my coaching all the time. I'm like, forget about the money. Let's focus on what you love to do and how you can serve at that level. And it's weird, especially like, oh, I'm starting a business. I have to make sure I'm like, don't worry, the money's going to come. Because when you understand the law of vibration, when you start to take universal laws into this sense, it's all about where you're vibing at. And it's all also another one called law of focus, where you put your attention to is where energy is going to go. Wherever energy goes, that's where manifestation grows. So when you're looking at these principles, these are old truths that have been around 4,000 or 5,000 years, have been told. I mean, it's not something new. And it's so sound advice, because it's like, if you just focus on that element, your vibration rises, holds in a better place. Your focus is more on just that element, where not of the lack. A lot of times, this is why when I say law of vibration is the first step before law of attraction steps in. And a lot of times people say, well, law of attraction doesn't work. And I always look and I go, where was your focus on what you're doing? What are you attracting? Where are you putting your energy to? Because a lot of times when people want to make money or make more money, especially if you're in business, your focus isn't actually where it needs to be. And some people go, no, it is. I know. I want to make money. I'm seeing the number. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And it's funny, because when I start diving deep, there is a focus of debt. There's a focus of lack. There's a scarcity mindset that's behind it. There's limiting beliefs when it comes to money. And when I find these things, I'm like, this is what's going to hold you back. We got to get through that stuff. That's the stuff we have to reprogram, recondition. And then all of a sudden we can then hone in on more of this, utilizing the universal laws in the way that's going to benefit you more, and so forth.
Got it. Okay, could we back up a little bit? Could you talk about what the universal law is and kind of give us a rundown on it?
Yeah, universal laws, there's a bunch of them. And they're spiritual truths that have been told thousands and thousands, it's just over thousands and thousands of years, that have been holding a truth. Like, it's just kind of how the world works. It wasn't until quantum physics came around that actually started to prove these things to be true. Like, science is just catching up to this, right? When you think like law of vibration, right? Nikola Tesla said in 1900 that everything in the universe is a frequency, a vibration, and energy. And if we start to look at it from that perspective, we'll have monumental shifts in humanity faster than we've ever seen before. And so everything has a vibrational imprint to it. Like, if you look at gold versus lead, it's just a different vibration that it has that shows up in a different physical form. Right. So it's how, the vibration is what, the molecular changes, the electrons, how they're spinning. I don't know how far down you want me to go that rabbit hole, but so it's all these kind of things that happen. And so each vibrational state, some people call it a consciousness level. You have to raise yourself to a certain vibration. The law of vibration states you have to be at a certain, you can only experience in your life whatever vibration you're at. So to put it in a different quote you probably heard before, the quote is life doesn't happen to you, it happens through you. But the actual quote from a vibration standpoint is life doesn't happen to you, it happens as you are. Okay. So wherever you're vibing at is what you're going to be sending out into this field, this universe. And then it's going to respond back to you what you're putting out there. And so that's just the law of vibration. Then there's the law of attraction that The Secret came out with in 2006, and it was really talked about. It's basically like attracts like. So whatever vibration state you're at, you're going to attract those things into your life. So let's put it an example in money. If you're vibrating at a lower vibration with money, you can't. Let's say you're vibrating at a state that gives you an experience of let's say making $50,000 a year, but you have ambitions to make $1 million a year, let's say. Well, in that vibrational state, if you do not change that, I don't care what you do, because you can go do Facebook ads for your business, you can go do this, whatever that is. If you're stuck at that vibrational state, you will not make $1 million. It goes against every law in the book. That's why I said in my story, when we did the Facebook ads and discounting our exams, I said it wasn't because of that became successful. Because I've done, I remember I never really done Facebook ads, so I can't say anything. But long story short, it's one of those things where, that worked for us because, again, where did we come from? As you said, service, which was a higher vibrational state for us. We had clarity in it. We had a vision of why we were doing it. Why was it important to us? And what was our big concern? We had our heart in it, in other words. And so that's a higher vibration. So with that higher vibration, we did the work. All of a sudden it worked. And I remember it was a couple months down the road. All of a sudden, I'm like, man, this is not bad. It's actually kind of helping us. We're working. We 10x what our investment is. I'm like, man, I would love to see more of this. What happened the next 3 months? I got no new patients from Facebook. No new patients at all from Facebook. We actually stopped doing it because we were getting more referrals that was working better. And I'm like, why am I spending money here if I'm getting it from referrals now? Because the referrals died down because of the fear of COVID and lockdown. And then they came back a few months later. But I was laughing because I looked at my wife afterwards when we stopped and I said, man, I messed this all up. She's like, what do you mean? I go, I got a little like, wow, this is actually working. And I was like getting all excited now and that what it was bringing to us. I think that messed it up. She goes, well, you know how this works better than I do. So, and I was like, that's all good. We got the referrals coming in. We're back to how we ran this business. So I'm happy with it. But yeah, so that's kind of those are just some. There's over 12 universal laws, but those are just a couple. Like law of focus, that's another one that again where you put your attention to is where energy goes, and that's what you're going to be. Whatever you focus on, you're going to give life to.
Are we able to do a very quick one-line rundown of the 12 laws?
They're gonna sound. Well, I'll share them. They're gonna sound a little confusing, but I can give like one-liners on each.
Yeah.
I could do that. Yeah. So like the law of gestation. Everything in the physical world has a time frame of when it exists, like giving birth. It could be everyone. Everyone has it. You have a gestation period of when you're going to get to that level of success. We all have. Some people call it divine timing, and sometimes. So there's that one. The law of cause of effect. Everybody knows that one to a certain degree. Everything has a cause and it has an effect. It has a reaction. So every action has a reaction. The law of perpetual transformation of energy. This is a long one. This is basically just means that energy is always moving and flowing. It's always changing forms. So that can be, that's from a life-death perspective, but also where you're focusing your energy every day. You're either growing or expanding or shrinking in your life in some way, shape, or form. We talked about vibration. We talked about attraction. We talked law of manifestation is just the end point of attracting what it is that you've been putting out there into the world, to the universe, that has come, and now it's in the physical form for you. Let me see here. I'm trying to think of some other ones, but those are a good amount right now. We're up 7 right now. So
Cool. We'll call it good right there. That was awesome. I mean, I'm learning so much through this. So the first natural question I have is how does going to the law of vibration, because we spent the most time on that, how can someone increase their vibration to, I guess, be at the next better level?
It's real simple. It's just focusing. So you focus on an emotion that elevates you, right? And you can't fake this. This is the beautiful thing about working with the universe. You can't fake it. All this fake it till you make it doesn't work in the universe because it doesn't pick up on what you're saying or what you're doing. It picks up on the energy that you project. You can't fake energy. It's the element of who you are. So it's knowing that what's a mood. So one of the exercises I give a lot of my clients is what is something that you can do that brings you up and makes you feel good. You can think of something in the past. It could be a child, it could be a sport event where you did something really well. It could be you got an award, whatever makes you feel elevated. That's the feeling you want to just hone in on. You don't have to tie it into something. You just want to raise your vibe into that state. And then the key factor is how do you, then you could take it from there and you bring it to you in your body. You feel, where does it show up? And what you're trying to do is get your body to have an experience to know that, because you want to get everything involved. So when you get the body to start having this feeling and knowing where it is, then you can have the mind kick in, and eventually you'll pick up, and the mind will be like, hey, when you have this feeling, that means you're at this level. When you're at this level, that means you're more in alignment. When you're in alignment, that means things come easier. And what we're doing is we're retraining your brain to become aware of those things. And when we get to that point, then all of a sudden, and I say when we get there because it doesn't just happen. It's not something intellectual. You have to. It's beyond the mind. It's a feeling, and unfortunately, in our world today, a lot of us are disconnected with our bodies and disconnected with how they are. We don't tap into our intuition as much, or don't practice it a lot. And it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the stronger it gets, and the more sensitive you are to it. And so it's one of those things where, as you continue to do that practice, you're just continually elevating your vibe. That's all you're doing. It's emotions. You're just elevating the vibe, and you keep getting into that state. And over time, the body's going to start to get used to that, being in that vibe. When you do that, negative thinking goes away, scarcity mindset goes away. A lot of that stuff's going to dwindle away because that's lower vibrations, and you're trying to bring your vibration higher. And that's all it really is. It's simple as that. You can jam out to a song that you like every day that just makes you feel like a kid again. I mean, literally, I tell people all the time, I tell my clients all the time, I want you to get excited like a 4-year-old. And they're just like, and it's going to be probably hard for you to know what that feels like, but I want you to get to that state. And if I can get you to that state, you'll manifest anything in the world that you want. You'll be a billionaire next week. I mean, this sounds crazy, but the law of vibration states once you vibrate at that level and you're honed in, everything's there. It will exist. Will it happen though? Probably not. But then again, universe works fast. I mean, I had a client one time where they wanted to double their business and so forth. And we've been working on this inner work for like 5-6 months, right? And they're finally getting this transition. They're finally they're waking up, in other words. And I'm just like, oh, this is awesome. We got them to a certain place. And then all of a sudden, something happens with, he's a chiropractor. Something happened with another doc in the area. And all of a sudden now he's like, I'm going to give you all my clients for now until I get through this health stuff. And all of a sudden now his business is doubled. And I'm looking, or not, it's almost doubled. And I'm just looking at him going, yeah, that's energy. That's how it works. It's just you were there. He's like, well, it could have just been, and we can look at it logically and be like, well, if it wasn't for that doc, then this wouldn't have happened. And it's like, no, that's vibration. You're at that level. Here came the opportunity. Yes, it wasn't you doing it on your own. It's someone else who's providing it. But that's how this works. It can come in any form. You just have to be, the thing is, we have to be so open to just knowing that, hey, the universe got our back. The universe is way more. You have to understand, from an intellectual standpoint, our brain can only hold information, no matter how much you learn. I think it's 0.0000. There's 5 zeros. So 5 zeros and then like 1 some odd percent of all the information that exists. So us humans think that our mind, we're smarter, we're capable, we can dominate. That's why we like to control. And what you're doing is you're actually missing out on all the abundance of opportunities that are there, because the universe has all of it. It sees all the information. It has all things. So it knows how to construct in ways. I usually sometimes, for those who are like biblical, like to read scripture, or Christian or Catholic in some way, I always tell them, I'm like, God created the world in 6 days. You think he can't figure something out for you in a day or two, or even a half a day, in an hour, a second? Trust me, you just got to be open to it, and you just got to take all that resistance out. 6 days, he created everything. So I'm like, just think about that for a second. And they're like, wow, that actually makes sense. I'm like, no kidding. 6 days. Just think about that.
That's incredible. Okay, so going a little bit deeper into this, tell me about your opinions on karma. Does it exist? What is karma, and how can we potentially utilize it to our advantage?
Yeah, so the law of karma does exist. It is only existing in the physical world because we believe it to. I know this may get a little confusing, so just because humans, we have something called the human collective consciousness. We create our reality. That's a whole nother discussion, but I'll get back. I just wanted to mention that, but I want to get to the karma side. So karma has been so misconstrued in so many ways. It's not what we think it is. In my first book, I talked about this, because karma, if you look at the Sanskrit word, it means action. And when you are facing your karma or dealing with your karma, the only time that happens is it's the choices that you made in the past that have led you to where you are today. You can change your karma in this moment now to change your future karma, and what it'll change to be different, right? So we'll talk about finances, right? So think about karma in this way. I don't save. I spend my money. I don't put any savings in. I don't invest in anything. I don't do any of that. Well, 20 years down the road, your karma, you're going to look and go, crap, I have no money for savings, whatever it may be, and so forth. Well, you can make that change 20 years down the road and say, you know what, I'm going to be more mindful in saving. I'm going to start investing my money. I'm going to start doing that. And then 10 years down the road, you're going to be in a different state than where you were before. That's the law of karma. That's just how it works. It's just think of it as like an accumulation of actions that you've created over time that is showing where you are today. And that could be thoughts. So it doesn't have to be just it's choices you make. It's the thoughts. It's the actions you take. Um, all those things. And that just led to where you are. And then your job is that some spiritual people say that's not true. You have karma from past lives and all this other stuff. I could debunk those things a little bit, but in the essence, it's just speaking on karma. It's just accumulation of past stuff that has led to where you are today. And you have that power and the choice to choose to make a difference for your future.
So then going deeper into that, let's say you do you do something wrong to someone. How does karma play a role? Is it just because that's the vibration you're vibrating at, and so then you're gonna make a mistake in the future, or does that have anything to do with each other?
So the way I remember karma was growing up is that if you do some harm, it's going to come back and get you in some way, shape, or form, right? They always say karma's the B word there, and that's how it always taught. I was always like, because I remember I always tried to be good. I was raised Roman Italian Catholic, and shame and guilt was on me. And always, if I make a mistake, holy cow, I never hear the end of it. So I tried to avoid those things, but sometimes if I did something wrong, I would feel so bad about it. And then people be like, oh, karma's going to get you. Karma's going to come get you. And I was like, why would it come get me? This is my mindset 15, 16, 17 years old. I'm like, why is karma going to come get me when my intention was not to be evil? Like I had no intention. Let's say it might have been a girl I may have hurt or something like that. I had no intention on doing that. It just happened. Whatever it may be. And but when we do harm upon someone, the karma from that is the lower vibrational emotions that come from it, guilt, shame, whatever it may be from that. And it's not only that you're that person, that the person who does something, it's also the other person on the reaction, because they're going to go into a lower vibration too, anger, frustration, shame, whatever it may be. And so that's going to continue to perpetuate until we heal that, release that, let it go. And then all of a sudden that karma is released. Now that energy of the things that you're holding, again, you're just holding on from the past and letting that go and healing from the past, those actions, because you're in the present, still stuck in the past. And so when you can let that go, that frees you to shift your future. Because what karma is doing, right? It's choices, actions that you make. That's why I said it's thoughts. I said it's the actions you're taking, the choices you make. Those are all three. So it can be one of them, two of them. It could be all three of them. And so if you're constantly in your mind remembering of your past, of something that happened, that lowers your vibe, and also lowers the other person who may be holding on, lowers that vibe. And if you can imagine you had like a conflict with somebody and you did wrong or whatever it may be, and you go there and you're like, I'm sorry, you apologize, you do all that. The person's like, I forgive you, thank you, blah, blah, and all of a sudden you guys both feel lighter. You're going to go on with your life from that moment on in a whole different vibration than we were holding on before. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I think that's a very important point. And so apologizing, all that kind of just betters your vibration, betters the, I guess, karma that we talked about. And it just makes everything better so then you can live a better life. Is that kind of like what apologizing does? Or
it's the power of forgiveness. And when you're asking for forgiveness, you're forgiving yourself, in other words. Whether the person forgives you or not, that's not your job. Your job is just to be like, I effed up. I'm sorry. I apologize. And you make a conscious effort to be better. This happens like in relationships a lot. When in certain relationships, like I'll be talking to some, client, and I'll be like, why are you doing the same thing over and over? I go, apologize, own it. And then you, regardless what they say, what they do, because imagine a relationship you've been with someone for 10 years. There are things you're great at and there's things you suck at. Let's just be honest. And there's going to be patterns that are going to show up, and your spouse has been conditioned in a way based on what you did, karma, right? Condition them in a specific way. Now you're like going, and you keep you keep messing up. Instead, take a moment and just hone on to one thing and say, I'm sorry, I apologize, be sincere about it. Don't fake this stuff. And then what I mean by don't fake it, because what's going to happen is you're going to commit now to make that change. And it's your job to then focus on that, to make that change. And then when you do that, the relationship gets better. Because in the beginning, spouse doesn't be like, nah, he's going to do the same thing over and over. And then all of a sudden, over time, they're like, wait a minute, you made a change. Oh my goodness. And now everything's elevating. That might be a little different than what we're talking about, but I'm just kind of using it as an example. Like if you mess up, you own it, and then you hone on to it. You own it. You forgive yourself. You make a mistake. It happens. And then from there, you commit to not making that mistake again. And you don't. You may slip up, but whatever that may be, maybe you said you're going to do the dishes and you didn't, and wife's getting tired of that, whatever it may be. But you can use many examples with this. But at the end of the day, it's like you just own it, and you're just like, that's it. I'm not going to ever do that again. This is what I'm committing to. And you're making a commitment really to yourself. You're making a commitment to the relationship, and everything gets better. It's going to. And again, the purpose of forgiveness is not to get forgiveness to see someone else have that reaction. It's forgiving yourself at the end, because in your vibration, you're releasing those lower vibrations, and you're allowing yourself to go back up to those higher vibrations. And when you do that, that's when you can start manifesting more and getting to the life that you want to create.
Got it. And just a random thought, but just because I'm still so new to this, are vibrations kind of an average of different aspects of your life? So you could have very high vibrations in many aspects, but one very low vibration kind of holding you back. Is that how it works?
Yeah, there's multitudes, because you can look at, like, let's look at your life, right? So I teach something called the 5 M's in my business with clients. And so it's mindset. It's all related to my last name, Manzo. So it's mindset, marriage, which is your relationships, movement, which is your physical health, mission is your passions and purpose of what you do. These are your businesses and things like that. And then money. And so if you look at those 5, nobody has it. Nobody's a master of all 5. We try to create harmony in this as best as we can. But we all came with, some have better money consciousness, but we're not great in a relationship. Some are better in relationships, but not better at money consciousness. So those are just the vibes of where we are and different things and where we stand. And then when we average that all out, that's you. That's your vibration. And so it's not from an, so just to share this, a lot of people get into this point, then they're like, well, then I just have to raise my vibration here. I just got to focus here. It doesn't work. Like, let's say I'm going to work on money. I'm going to learn how to do these different things, and I'm going to focus on this. And you don't have to don't get intellectual with this. Just focus on just raising your vibe every single day. And because the thing is, vision is, there's a lot of spiritual truth behind this, and quantum physics shows it too. And so does neuroscience. Vision is the most powerful thing, because you're setting the page. You're telling a story in your mind that you are telling to the universe, this is what I want to create. And then your job is just to hone your vision, your vibration to stay as high as possible. Because the more it can stay in a better state, the more you create magnetic power to attract that into your life. You don't have to think about your vision all the time. It doesn't really work that way to do that, because then you're creating attachments and resistance, and you're not going to get there. I used to be a master of that. But it's one of those things where it's just it's like setting and forgetting it. And then just going, all right, I'm just going to focus on my vibe here, and that's it. And that's kind of what helps there. But yeah, there's limiting beliefs that hold us back, hold our vibes down. There's conditioning in the subconscious mind that can do that. There's a lot of things we're very unaware of that we don't know we're unaware of. And a lot of my work is to unveil those things. But I don't know, like, I'm not going to tell you, like, someone starts coaching, working with me. I don't have your limiting beliefs figured out. I don't have any of that stuff figured out. I have to see your patterns. Once I start to see patterns, those give me clues to know, ooh, there's a limiting belief here. We got to work on that. Let's go. Let's dive into that. I'm feeling a call to go there. Or, it can be something that you're totally unaware of, how you talk about yourself, or in the tone that when you talk about money, your tone just gets low. And I'm like, every time you bring up money, it gets low. I want to, there's some limiting beliefs there I want to dive into. Let's talk about that. And then kind of those kind of things.
Got it. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. I know earlier in this conversation, you mentioned David versus Goliath and how he didn't throw multiple rocks. He threw one. So relating this to our conversation, what is that one rock that he threw?
Yeah, so this is, again, going back to law of vibration, right? When you're in that vibrational state, a lot of times we're focusing on the do. And I call something called effortless action that leads to effortless success. Another universal law is called the law of inspired action. If you truly understand the law of inspired action, you'll never have to think again when it comes to making the next step or the next idea, the next business venture, the next anything. You'll never have to do that. Because if you understand law of vibration and the law of inspired action, when you're in a vibrational state, let's say I'm in a vibrational state of being a millionaire, but yet my bank account is 0, but I'm in the vibrational state. The ideas, the people, the circumstances and situations will come to me to get to that state, because I'm already vibing there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So you get what you put out.
Exactly. Wherever I'm vibing, it's going to come. So, if you're in a low state, negative state vibration with money, then all of a sudden, what are you going to be doing? You're going to see things, you're going to take action. Let's say, oh, hey, this stock has been doing great. Come on in, man. I'm telling you, I made money on it already. It's got all this growth to happen. Oh, great. Let's do it, man. I'm so excited. Thank you for that. I'm so excited to make this extra money now. And what happens? Stock plummets. Why? It's not just because of this person, but they are choosing something that was going on that route because they vibe there, right? But it's when you have this inspired action that comes within, like writing my 3 books. Never from the title of the book, from the titles of the chapter to even writing the book, I didn't have to think about it. Never did. Because of inspired action. I got into a vibrational state of being in a good vibe. And then all of a sudden, I remember like my 3rd book, someone was like, why'd you write Decoding the Matrix? How'd that come to you? If I tell you the story, it's going to be weird, but I'll tell you, it just came to me. Like literally, like one day, it was in November, and I was thinking about conditioning of the mind. I was coming out of a meditation, and I was just thinking about a thought came to me about conditioning of the mind. That's what caught my attention. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go into this. And all of a sudden, like a book started showing, and I'm like, book. And then all of a sudden, it was like Decoding the Matrix. And I was just like, that's genius. Wow, Decoding the Matrix. Yeah, you should write about that. That's kind of cool. I'm like, you know what? Let me write that down. That's a really good idea. And I said, I reached out to my cover person. I say, hey, can you put a here's what I want to write a book on. Here's kind of have an idea. Just let me see what it shows up. And we had to fine tune it, but he showed me the image and everything. And I go, holy cow, that was what I had in my head. I was like, this is so cool. Did I do anything? Did I think of anything? Did I create it? No, it came to me. And that's kind of the work I really try to, and this is hard for me because we are so heavily conditioned to do all the time. I mean, even with entrepreneurs, when I say I'm like a business coach, that's why I've kind of changed my name up a little bit. I'm a spiritual / business mindset coach. The reason why is because when I get into spiritual stuff, they're like, oh, that stuff doesn't work. And I'm like, well, I'll show quantum physics and neuroscience to back that up. But it's really shifting that mindset to go into a different way of doing things, which you're still going to get the same results. Sometimes you get them faster, but guess what? There's no burnout. You're less stressed. You stay in a creative state. You feel good most of the time. You show up as your best version most of the time. I'd rather be there because I've done my first 5 years of my entrepreneurial journey where I was stressed, reading 80, 120 books a year, podcasts and videos and all this download of information because I was told information's power, right? Knowledge is power. The more knowledge you have, the more you can make, the more valuable you are. And so I got caught up into that. And then I said, hold up, value is determined by what I see within me, not by what I do. Don't get me wrong. Do I still read books? Absolutely. Do I go look for books now? No, they come to me. It's like all of a sudden I'll be in a state where I'm like, man, I keep having this, I'm hitting a wall here. I just don't understand why. I'm like, you know what? And I go into a meditation and I kind of just say, if there's anything that I need, whatever I have to do to, if there's something I need to learn, please let it show up in my field that I'll be very well aware of that. And also I may be I may be on a podcast and the guy's like, I'm going to refer you my book. Take a look. And all of a sudden I read the book and it's that one thing I needed. And I'm just like, how the heck did that happen? Like that was that one thing. Or sometimes I'm just watching something and I'm watching a movie and then all of a sudden there's this one little thing out of the movie that I'm like, holy cow, wait a minute. That was so profound. Babe, can we stop that for a second, hon? I got to share this with you. And I'll just share it. She's like, you got all that out of that one little thing. I'm like, it's just coming into my field. Right. And that's how you have to be so open. It's going to come so left field on you. And it's fun. It's like a kid again. It's not like this whole structure. I always say adults are just children that are bigger bodies because that's deep in a lot of ways. I was interviewing somebody and we actually talked about emotional hurt when you have an emotion that you don't like when you go through something in life that you never heal from emotionally, you are stuck there until you do. And I was like, oh my God, that relates to what I say. And that's one of the reasons why I say this. And there's a lot of truth behind it because we've gotten so serious and we've let our left brain lead our lives. And the more you do that, left brain's very important. You need both parts of your brain. But when you lead from a logical, intellectual, information dominant aspect, which majority of people out in this world are today, because we have something called a smartphone right in our hand. It's a computer that can give us access to anything. It's one of those things where you miss out on the beauty of connecting. You miss out on the beauty of what life really brings. The right side of your brain, or tapping into what I share here, it brings out this like creativity as a kid again. I don't know if you get excited. I can feel the vibe. I get excited, man. I start thinking, and yeah, I can get stuck in my other world and be like, oh my God, but look at this, look at that, hold this and that. I could, but it's like when you were a kid, you didn't worry about any of those things. You were just being imaginative and being creative and being playful, and it was being in the present moment. And I always tell people, if you have kids, especially around 3-4 years old, go be with them. Go spend time with them. Be in their world. Just literally, I just became a father like 6 weeks ago, and it's one of those things.
Congratulations!
Oh, thanks, man. It's so exciting. And I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, I cannot wait for the day. I mean, I don't want to lose my present moment with her, but I just tell her, I'm like, the day she says, Dad, I want to have a tea with you, or like, let's have tea, or whatever that imagination thing she creates, because I don't even limit her on that. I was like, I'm going to dive so deep into that world. I am so excited. Why? Because she's going to teach me and remind me how to use my imagination. Here's someone like me who uses my imagination and visualization often, almost every single day I'm doing this. Yet she's still going to teach me because she's a master of it. I've lost that master art that I'm trying to work back. But if we can step into that, we step into a whole different world that has been backed by science. This is not, before it was just spiritual stuff, right? It was just all, these are tales that have been told. We can't say that anymore. Quantum physics has validified a lot of universal laws. It's validified tons of spiritual truths. It's validified so many different things. And then even neuroscience has backed up a lot of these things too. Like one of the, there's a spiritual truth that says what you see in your mind's eye is what you create in your reality, right? Bob Proctor talks about this, or so many people that have talked about this. I can tell you some, mystics and sages that said this. Quantum physics, they did a study. They show that that's true. Neuroscience, there's a part of your brain that literally does that. So it's like, we are starting to come to a state in the world where science is now finally playing catch up to spirituality. And I always laugh about it. I'm like, yeah, 5,000, 6,000 years ago, wisdom that has been shared. And now we're finally, as humans, finally going, yep, we finally have technology to develop to what we can finally figure this thing out. And then I'm like, I wonder what they're saying back in the day, looking at that going, yeah, you guys had to take that long. If you just trusted us, it would have been a whole different world from that moment on.
I mean, that's what religion is, right? The trust, and then the science comes in to verify. So,
exactly.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much for going into that. I am very curious about the first two books you wrote as well. I mean, you wrote 3 books, and I think that's incredible. Could you quickly talk about what the first 2 books are called and a little bit about them?
Yeah. So Rediscover Your Greatness was my first book, and it really was just laying out who you really are, understanding the law of focus, how words are the fabric to reality. And then I get into different elements of like my life, limiting beliefs. I had, I talk about my financial stuff that I went through, and then how I came through that. And I talk about death in that aspect. So it's just really understanding the aspect of life in general. It's it's not a quick read, but I could write a book on each chapter. I always tell people, but I wanted to at least get, I'm planting seeds with that book and just to get you to look a little deeper. But it will start to harness on some of the laws and how rules of life work in some way. My second book it's called A Walk in the Dark. And what that really is understanding the darkness of life and how it's our greatest ally. We all are going to face challenges. We've all had them. We always will. Life is all about contrast. There's no, even with the work I do, you're going to be human. Like even with all the stuff I know and I do, I'm human. When something bad happens, quote unquote bad, because you only put meaning on life, what it means. Something that like lowers my vibration, I'm going to be human. I'm making angry, frustrated, whatever it may be. But I let it be a teaching moment for me. In the book, I share like my relationships with like when I have an argument with my wife, I go, in the back of my mind, I'm excited about the argument, but in the moment, I'm not. I'm being human here. But at the end, I am, because guess what happens in every argument? We get better. We improve our communication. We get stronger as a unit between the two of us. And I go, I wasn't taught this as a kid. I had to learn this. And then all of a sudden it was like, it's okay to have these things. And then going through that. But I share wisdom and things of how to center your nervous system and how to sit in that darkness. So that way, because that is going to give you the most wisdom than anything else in the world can give you. You can't get it out of a book. I mean, you can learn it from a book, but you have the experience of going in the darkness. And I shifted my life halfway into my career to let life lead me. And when something showed up that lowered my emotion, I would sit with it. And then when I came out to the other side, I was like, holy cow, that was only for me. Like, oh man, that I needed that. And sometimes, it'll guide you in what you need and so forth. And then the last thing I share in there is just the cause of all suffering. I literally share that in the whole chapter on that, chapter 8, breaking down how resistance is that and how that shows up in our life and so forth.
Well, I'm really excited to read it. I'm going to link it in the show notes for everyone that's interested in this as well. And Victor, I do have a few more questions for you. What is a piece of advice that you have for someone who's just looking to start up their own business?
The most simplest advice I can give, because when you start up a business, you get into a lot of the doing of what I should do and all those kind of things. Number one, trust yourself, have faith in yourself. You are more valuable than you think you are. You have everything within. I know these are cliches. They've been said over and over, but hopefully from this podcast, I've already kind of showed you how that is. But one of the things I can say is not only trust yourself, but trust that the universe has your back. Trust it. Look at what's showing up in your life. That's going to tell you what you're focusing on. It's a beautiful thing. Focus on your emotions. See if you're getting stuck in this low vibe and you're constantly there, you're out of alignment to your vision, or you're out of alignment to where you want to take your business or whatever that is. So get back, focus on that emotion to gets excited. You can, if you just do that, just that most one simple thing, you will be successful. Your path will lead, it'll get you there faster than you can imagine.
I love that piece of advice. Thanks so much. And I know you said you've read hundreds of books and you've even written a few yourself. Not your own book, but what is the one book you would recommend for every entrepreneur to read?
The Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. So that book is 81 verses. That's all it is, about life and the way of life. So the Tao Te Ching means the way of life, the way of life, the way of something. I should know this. There are other books I can mention, but that is the one, because if you really want to understand, like one of the first quotes, one of the first verses, I think it's 3 or 4, he'll talk about if you feel like you have to force to get something done, like you feel like you need to go do that, like you're just getting this thing that you want to go do and you want to force it. Don't go sit and don't do anything. Like that's backward advice that what we're used to hearing. But there's a principle behind that that is so profound that if you really, so I recommend, so Tao Te Ching is what I recommend. That's the original book. But there's one that I for those who are like, okay, I'm going to read 81 verses and what does that mean? If you want a little bit more of a deeper aspect of that, Wayne Dyer came out with one. It's called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. He does his own memoirs on the 81 verses that will give you explanations. Because the thing is, if you read the Tao Te Ching, wherever you're vibing at, that's only how you're going to comprehend it. Wayne Dyer is a little bit more advanced in his consciousness levels, so he'll break it down and hopefully it connects. But even then, you're only going to get what you're vibing at, but at least there'll be someone explaining it a little bit in that way.
Wow, that's such an interesting concept. You only get what you vibe at. And I'm starting to piece it together in this interview because I'm realizing that like certain books I've read and I'm like, I just don't care whatsoever. But then I reread it a year later and I'm like, holy crap, why is this making so much more sense now? And so I 100% get what you're saying now, but thank you so much for that. Last question I have for you is, where can our audience get in touch with you? This has been an incredible interview, Victor.
I appreciate that. Yeah, my website is my hub for everything. So www.empoweryourreality.com. If you like what I'm talking about and resonates with you, let's hop on a coaching call. I have a one-on-one. I offer a free coaching call to dive into what your challenges are, your pain is, what you're facing at the moment. What's your dream life? What do you want to create? What do you really want? Because it's amazing how entrepreneurs don't really know what they want. They say it, but it's not really them. And, then I'll give you some action steps to move forward. And then if I feel like I can help you for qualifying into that realm, I'll share how I can do that and so forth. I have my podcast. I got some free resources on there. But if you want to follow me on social media, on the bottom left of my website, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. So I'm sharing stuff at least 5 times a week of something that is relating to kind of these things: spirituality, mindset, money, money mindset, and those kind of things, to just help elevate the individual. So come on, if you have questions or anything, DM me. I do read my DMs and I do respond. I love hearing from people. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome, Victor. Thank you so much for your time. I'll link all this in the show notes.
I appreciate you having me on, brother. I had a blast.